everybody. Welcome to the South Florida Bitcoin Citadel. I'm Kurt Walker Jr., and this is the Magic Dapp workshop. If you're watching live, thanks for watching live. Please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and share across social media. I'm going to very quickly pass the mic over to Justin Pauly, who is one of the partners over at VX Technologies, and then he will be handing over to Zack Weiner, who will be presenting about Magic Dapp, which is a click-to-code, yeah, that's the right way to say it, click-to-code app, allows you to build Bitcoin apps, so it's an app that builds an app. Pretty exciting. Again, please share across social media, like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and I pass to Justin.
Thank you so much, Kurt. My name is Justin Pauly. I'm the president of VX Technologies, and we are so excited to have this demonstration of Magic Dapp, which is the sister application to Alpha Dapp, which is, so Magic Dapp is a wonderful, as Kurt mentioned, an app that builds other apps and allows you to do it with no code. So it's really, this is the DIY sort of application builder. And then Alpha Dapp is our fully supported, we build it with you and for you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the founder of VX Technologies, Zack Weiner.
Hi, and thank you for joining us. I'm Zack. All of you in the room know me, so it's nice to see all of you. Thank you for showing up. Virtually, it's great to see you too, even though I can't see you. Today we're going to cover Magic Dapp. As Justin mentioned, there are two flavors of this application builder. The first flavor is Magic Dapp. It's do-it-yourself. We're going to walk through how you can do it yourself, what the process is, what the options are, sort of maybe the types of applications that you can tackle with Magic Dapp. Anything that we build today using Magic Dapp can be done by my team for you, configured for your team via Alpha Dapp. So if you're the hands-on, I want to get this done, I want to play with it kind of person, then Magic Dapp is probably for you. And if you'd like to kind of describe the business operation, the application need, and have us configure it for you, that's another way that we can go. So without further ado, actually let's start here. I'm gonna share a screen. Share screen. Let's see what happens if you know what, Kurt, I'm just gonna go for the whole screen. I'm gonna make this big. That'll be easier for me to deal with. You guys will just have to see me for a second. So we're gonna start in Alpha Dapp with an app that's actually already configured. And just talk about what's going on here for a little bit. So I have brought up the Cardinal University demonstration app. And in this app, you can see, number one, there's a few settings that you can change. But on the left side of the page, we have a list of the data tables that you can add to. We call them schemas. We use Bitcoin schema to do this. But you can think about it as a data table or a spreadsheet on chain, or sort of anything that has like columns and rows or a specific data schema. Now in the example, we're gonna go to courses real quick to start. So before we click there, just notice there are a couple of things that I wanna point out. The first of which is that in the settings, we have this option to turn on feed activity. Feed is kind of like a Facebook feed or a LinkedIn feed or a Twitter feed, in that if you turn on the feed activity, then we will provide a web page that will allow anybody, whether they're logged in, a user, or an admin, so logged out state, logged in state, or high permission state, to be able to see all of the records in a single list that were created for this table. Right? It's a public feed of the records. But just to get started, to show an example, we've built out a courses table. The table itself has a number of fields. It's got a student ID, the course name, the ID for the course, number of credits, blah, 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 blah. And each of these fields is a specific type. In some cases, it might be plain text. In the case of the student BID, that's actually their blockchain address. So this is a very specific type of letter and number combination. And then for something like course ID, These are pre-defined fields, so you can only choose from the options provided by the admin during setup. Now, if I were to, let's say, want to add, as an admin, I want to add a record here. If I go into the data set and I click add new data, I get a form that shows up exactly like the drag and drop fields that we chose. So right now we're in the course context. So when I clicked add new, it already populated with course. There are a few students that have registered. So I can search by email address here and it'll map to their Bitcoin address. Let's say student 4. In this case, the course name is freeform. The name may be something different across universities. So let's say, what are the options here? Say intro to biology, and you can see as I'm misspelling things why you might want to have pre-selectable fields. And then we'll assign that to biology 101. Biology gets 4 credits. We'll say it was professor 1. We'll give the institution a name. That's freeform. Campus is also freeform. So actually, let's in this case, let's just say the institution is the Citadel. It's not quite how you would do this, but we're just going to example it real quick. Campus is Delray Beach. And we're going to say this person failed their bio course. So when this is created, we'll see on the console here that we're actually going to get records written to chain. The first thing that happens is it gets paid for, and then we broadcast, and then we'll get a transaction ID that we can go check out on what's on chain. Oops, that's not correct. Where? Copy that. So now when we go check this out on chain, I'll make this bigger so that everybody at home can see it on the screen. You can see that all of the data that we piped into, and you don't necessarily need to know how to read this, but you can see that all of the data that we piped into that form ended up inside of a transaction that is now on the blockchain, right? We had a course name, we named it Intro to Biology. The course ID had a tag, it was Biology 101, we gave it 4 credits, blah, 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 blah. Now, the real value here is that we get the URL here for the application. I guess I can make that bigger so that you can see it on the screen as well. Every application gets its own URL. They can be accessed by this URL, and we sent that to a student. So really the value here is that once records are written, they should all be able to be verified, right? So no matter who you are as an admin of whatever applications, maybe you're a user, maybe you're logged in, maybe you're not, maybe you're just an employer, who doesn't have an Alpha Dapp or a Magic Dapp account. But either way, everybody gets this scan QR code button. So when the QR code gets scanned, it may work with my camera. I'm going to log in from the phone with that user. Who gets a QR code. And then when they show the QR code to the scanner, the QR code displays to the auditor, the authenticator, some information about the user's account, including their address. Then on the validator side, we go out and look for all the records with that address and start to check if they're valid or not. And in this case, we do have some valid data coming back. So that was basically the easiest way to get started. We showed you a schema that was already made, an admin that had already logged in, and they wrote a record to a student that I already knew about. And that's the power of Alpha Dapp. So Magic Dapp and Alpha Dapp do very similar things, but I had already configured this application so that it could just be used by whoever had the permissions to use it. Moving forward from here, we're going to start from scratch and kind of build some of our own things together. But before I do that, I'd like to just ask if there are any questions. I can't see the YouTube stream, so if we do get questions, just let me know.
A lot of people give me good feedback, but no questions.
Okay. There are a couple of different types of users. The first one that you're seeing right now Now we've jumped into Magic Dapp from Alpha Dapp. You're actually viewing the Magic Dapp screen. The first type of user that we should really talk about is an admin. And an admin is a type of user that has the ability to create new applications, to add fields to data types, create data types or schemas, and create permissions for other users. If we are to jump into one of these apps that we've already created, you can see that in the area where we can modify the schema in some way, not only do we have the data table where you saw me put in a record before, but we have this concept of permissions. So admin can create or read any records that are written by the application. They're the admin, they have full permissions to do these things. A user is somebody who has an account at a specific app URL. So not, magic.io, but at magic.io/app/NID. And in this case, a user is not able to read the records or create the records. A guest is not able to read the records or create the records, but a user can read them and is not allowed to create them. Should I look at your camera and pause this live stream so that you could, just kidding. So each application may define different granular settings for each of the schemas that they use to create their, that are used in that application. So in the demonstration, I'll actually bring up another screen and we can see the admin side and the user side at the same time as we start to build something. Just a couple of more things to point out here before we get to building. We have mapped, as you saw earlier, the email address of registered users to their blockchain ID. So what that means is in addition to trying to make this as easy as possible for people to use, we've also tried to figure out ways to make it as easy as possible for people to forget that the blockchain exists, right? Most people know how to use Web 2 technologies today. They're familiar with WordPress or Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever publication service you want to build your website. But they're not really that familiar with Web 3. There's only like 4 or 5% of the population that has even gotten into Web 3. So when you create an account, we don't force you to remember your 12-word seed phrase, right? We offer a way for you to come get it. Down here, right? We offer a way for you to come get it, but you didn't need to worry about this to start. And as a matter of fact, if you were to need to get up and running quickly and get started, you could get started with Magic Dapp without even thinking about your seed phrase, without even thinking about your public key or your address. This is all handled in the background for you so that we don't have to confuse users in any way. You also have some profile settings. So in the case of a course, you noticed in the previous course, we didn't include name or student ID or any of that stuff in the course record, just as an example. But in the real world, there would probably be a name or, let's say, a government ID number or student ID number that was associated with the record that you would not want to publish to the blockchain. So we have the ability for saving some data, either locally or in our database, that never gets published to the blockchain, that can just be used to help verify what the data was originally, even if we've only included it in a signature and not included it in plain text in the output. These options for your profile are not infinitely configurable, but if you need more options for your profile than we've provided here, just send me a direct message on Twitter or find us at our website, which is vxtechnologies.com, verifyforx.com, sorry, vanity domain. And you can find our email addresses there so we can help you to figure out what other information you'd like to save in your user's profile that might not necessarily make it to chain. We also have these areas of data types that we talked about. I'll go back here to drill this point home a little further. Where things are...
I have a quick question for you, Zach. So Randy is asking, is there a process for editing data that maybe was wrong or maliciously entered in some way?
So the answer to that is yes. But the real answer to that is no. So the blockchain is forever. Once you publish something in a transaction, you can't go back and say, I'd like to please remove this transaction from the blockchain, or I'd like to please remove this transaction's output, or edit the text in sort of the way that you might on, let's say, if you were building a content management website or a website on a content management system. That said, there are mechanisms to publish a new transaction that says, hey, I'd like you to please take everything out of the first transaction and then make this slight update before you show it on screen. So it is possible to do things like update if we configure it properly, but you can't actually go back and delete something or change the way that something was stored on the blockchain, because the blockchain is immutable. So that's the power of what we're doing here, but it's also, with great power comes great responsibility. Kind of thing.
Beautiful.
And I'll tell you that we personally have been through this in our business. We're going to get to a point in a few minutes where I'll show you how to upload a spreadsheet. Justin, did you email me that spreadsheet? And if not, can you? So the first spreadsheet that we uploaded had some information that we probably wouldn't want on chain. It's not entirely private stuff. We didn't publish social security numbers or anything. But we as a team, as users inside of our group, actually published some things that were plain text that probably shouldn't have been. So when we get to that point where we're talking about spreadsheet uploads and things like that, you'll notice that I put some check marks in to actually slow the process down. For most of the cases, we've tried to make it as easy as possible and as few clicks as possible. But in some cases, we noticed that humans like to click through things faster than they actually read the instructions. So we slowed some things down to make sure you kind of had to read or had to take specific actions for this data to get on chain, even if it comes out of a spreadsheet. Back to where I was before the question. Right now on screen, you're looking at the data schema that we had created for this example of courses. And in this data schema, we have a couple of field types, right? A couple of fields where you could store data: student blockchain ID, the course name, and course ID specifically was one of these where I told you the user doesn't have the option to free-form write into the text field. They can only select from the options that have been predetermined by the admin. And in this case, we're looking right now at how you would add new tags to the application. So we only have 4 courses that the student could have chosen from right now. But if we wanted to say, like, let's create a blockchain course and add that, now we have a tag of blockchain 101. And if I go into this data and add a new data item, when I scroll down to course ID, we should also see, oh, I didn't save that, that's why. Oops. Let's down to the save button. I should get a nice little notification. Should. All right, well, I'm not going to wait on that. But we can pre-configure the selectable options that are allowed to be chosen for this field type. And when you create a record, one of the things that's most important to know about this is we didn't ask you to go buy any crypto. You didn't have to go sign up for a wallet. You didn't have to go sign up for an exchange. You didn't have to put your credit card number in anywhere. We didn't ask you for your bank account information or your KYC or your physical address. You can choose to put your birth date in your profile if you like, but it's not mandatory. So in doing these things, we've made it as easy as possible for every individual across the world to use the blockchain with as little friction as possible. So we did the demonstration of the record creation and verification. We looked at what the info was that got on the blockchain. Okay, let's talk about signatures for a second. So how do we know that the data is authentic? It's a really good question, right? Once it's written to chain, you can prove that, the number 1, 2, 3, 4 was written to chain, but how do you trust that? And in most cases, you probably shouldn't. Anybody can write whatever they want to the blockchain. But in certain cases, we can do things like create a signature from a known user who has a blockchain private key or an address that we can use to verify the signature. So every transaction or every record that's created using Magic Dapp or Alpha Dapp is created and signed by the person who authored the record. So in this case, that might be a school's administrator or a professor. But any way this is configured, we as Magic Dapp and Alpha Dapp know the user's public key. We know the user's public address, actually. So we can verify that a specific user, i.e. the one that has this address, actually signed the transaction that's located on the blockchain. So we use some web technologies and blockchain technologies and cryptographic technologies to combine the best of all of the worlds to create a secure system where we know some of the information, the blockchain knows some of the information, some of this is just cryptographically provable. I also want to make the point that we can decide whether or not to include something in the blockchain. So this toggle button is on right now, but if you were to create a Magic Dapp where you wanted to store somebody's, let's say, first and last name, maybe you wanted to store their birth date, or maybe you had permission to store something a little more personal, like their social security number. While you should always be storing that incredibly sensitive information in an encrypted context, you should encrypt it before storing it. I'm personally a believer that all encryption will be broken one day, so I don't think we should even be storing like basic encrypted stuff on the blockchain. So what we've done here is when you unselect this box, if you were to leave include in blockchain off, what would happen is we would store that information in our database, and it would still be included in the signature that we put on chain. I'll talk to you about the two different types of signatures that we use. It would still be included in the data signature that we put on chain, but it wouldn't be stored in plain text. So in that way, you don't have to store it in plain text. You don't have to store it encrypted on the blockchain where it may be decrypted one day, but we can still use the information to prove that this information went into the record at the time the record was created using signatures. I guess this is a good time to go back and talk about the difference between the signatures that we use. So this is going to look like a lot of gobbledygook to most people in the audience, but we have two signatures here. So the first one you see here is written in plain text. It says data signature is the field type. We take all of the fields and all of the data in those fields and create a signature out of it. Whether or not the data is included in the blockchain is irrelevant to this first data signature. So if you had a whole bunch of highly sensitive information, your name, your birthday, your social security number, your address, I don't know, maybe your mother's maiden name, you could put all of those things into a signature. None of it you'd never be able to go backwards from signature to the original data. But if you know all of the original data, you can verify that it went into creating the signature. You're not going to forget your name. You're not going to forget your birthday. You're not going to forget your social. There's no reason to store those things in our database or on the blockchain, for instance. But you, as the user, owner, knower of that information, can put it into the signature algorithm and it'll spit out this exact same signature. So you could verify that the data was in one state when we started, and we are looking at data that's off-chain now, or a combination of on and off-chain now, and we can prove that all this stuff that was off-chain is exactly the same as the moment we put it on-chain. The second signature is a Bitcoin signature. This is attestation identity protocol and Bitcoin identity protocol, Bitcoin attestation protocol, BIP and BAP. And then there's another three-letter word in there somewhere that we'll figure out along the way. But the Bitcoin signature actually takes the whole of this transaction, everything that was put into this transaction, including the data signature that's hiding some of our sensitive data, and signs the whole transaction so that it can be validated by indexers. So what that really means is, like, we're going to broadcast this transaction to the chain. It's going to look like this on the chain. But how does somebody who's not inside of Magic Dapp or part of VXT or part of your team that built your Magic Dapp, how does the blockchain know that this signature is valid? And we conform to some standards to make that happen, but that's this second signature here. So the first one is the Magic or Alpha signature. And the second one is the Bitcoin signature. And in the combination of those two, we create a second layer of security that allows us to obfuscate the important information that you'd like to keep private.
Question.
Shoot.
Are you using real magic?
Yes. Always use real magic. Muggles out. All the muggles out. No, just kidding. Use as much magic as you can. There is actually very little magic here. We put in a lot of effort and went through like painstaking detail to make this as easy as possible for the end user so that it does kind of feel like magic. All right, so I think that's pretty much the setup here for what we're about to demonstrate. So I'm going to get out of Alpha Dapp for a second and go back to Magic Dapp, which is the one that we're going to create. Actually, let's use this as an example. I'm going to delete this application for a second and we're going to recreate it. No, I'm going to delete the schema and then recreate it. So one of the things that we haven't actually discussed yet is how do you set up an app, right? How do you get started? You saw the application that we demonstrated first, but how do you go and create your own? Well, it's as easy as in your view applications, you can just create a new application and give it a name. It's that easy. And then we create for you this separated URL and the settings area where we can save some of these things. In this case, we're going to upload a spreadsheet to the blockchain. So we're going to start, instead of dragging and dropping the fields and naming them by type and then clicking save, we're going to skip that whole step. We're going to take a spreadsheet that already has column headers. We're going to use that spreadsheet to create the DApp itself in seconds, minutes, something like that. We're also going to do a couple of different things here. So we're going to make sure that this is available for public viewing, meaning there's going to be a feed that can be seen by outsiders, whether they're logged in or not. And let's just avoid these other two for now. So we'll save these changes. That should be saved. I'm not seeing the notification, but let's just make sure that worked. Did not. Okay, so for the purpose of this, I'm going to jump back to Alpha Dapp real quick. Actually, let's just continue with the spreadsheet for the moment. Okay, so I have an application. I'm going to add a schema, but instead of doing it by the basic setup, the way that we did before, I'm going to jump to the bottom left and choose Import Data. Now, when I get to this screen, I can import a schema or a spreadsheet from a CSV. Almost every type of database that you might use today has an export to CSV. Whether you're using Microsoft spreadsheets or some other generic version of a spreadsheet, you can save that as an Excel sheet or as a CSV. They all have exports. We're going to start here with, let's see, what do we got here? Officer involved shooting reports, and we'll just drag that onto the screen. Now this is going to interpret the spreadsheet in some ways. Number one is it took the name of the file, then appended the word schema, and gave us, hey, this is going to be the involved shooting report schema. Now, we already know that, so I'm going to rename this to Philly, because that's where the information comes from, Philly incident report. Incident report. And it's going to show me an example of the data that it found in this spreadsheet. So in this case, it's giving us a preview. It found 511 publishable records. I think there are probably 2 sheets in here, so it found some others that we can update later. But in the first sheet of the Excel, it went ahead and created for us, let's see if we can blow this up a little bit, a sample of how it interpreted the rows of the spreadsheet. And so we can take a look by eye that this kind of matches up with what we expect. Generally, if it's our spreadsheet, we're going to have a good idea of how it should look. We can check that the column headers came out as the correct titles for these fields, and it looks pretty good to me to start. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit. Now we talked about how some of the information may be included on the blockchain, or you may decide that you only want this stuff in the database. It doesn't go on the blockchain forever, you know, like a student ID or a social security number. We can't know in the beginning what information is going to be in a client spreadsheet. We have no way to know or dictate how they use spreadsheets, and we don't want to be in that business. So we also don't want to make you change your spreadsheet in order for it to work with Magic Dapp. So when you import a spreadsheet for the first time, one of the things that you'll see here on the screen is we have some options around the column headers that we saw, right? So if I go back to the preview, the first column in the preview from the spreadsheet was document title. So the first field type that we can modify here is going to be called document title. Now, I do want to include document title in the blockchain, so I'm going to have to actively toggle on this switch. Now, if you were to just leave all of these off and go run and let's say upload, click upload, right? What's going to end up happening is the transaction itself is not going to have any of this plain text in it. It's going to basically just end at the end of the schema ID, except all of the information that was in the columns is going to go into creating this data signature. So you can still prove it later. So the fastest model for this, if you were to just kind of click through, is that none of the plain text fields end up on chain, but all of the data is still provable later. So in this case, we probably want most of this to be in plain text on chain. We probably want people to be able to see and or validate, verify, search, field, scour, whatever. So we're just gonna run through and toggle all of these on. Actually, I'll make the point here now that if you had some information in your spreadsheet that you did not want it to end up in our database or on the chain, you could click this trash bucket icon and it'll take the field out of the schema, before we publish it. In this case, I'm just going to keep all of the information here and we're going to toggle all of these on. Boop-a-doop. Click next. It gives you one more last time to check. So this isn't necessarily telling you what the data is. We already got a data preview in the previous screen. But what it is telling you is, hey, look, these are the things that are going to be included. This is how they're going to be included. These are the types of data we're expecting them to be, the name, and then in this case, we're going to stage all of this information, thank you very much, so that it's stored in a place and not saved to the blockchain yet. So this would be like, let's say you work in an office and you have a manager that's going to approve something. You're going to upload the spreadsheet. It's going to be saved in a database ready to be broadcast. Then your manager is going to come in. They're going to take a look at the data set. They're going to eye through it, and they're going to give their second approval to start publishing to the blockchain. So once we've gotten to this stage, out of the spreadsheet area, we're in what we call staged. And you can see that at the top right or the mid right of the screen in an orange shaped pill. It says that we're staged. We can go and take a look at the data. We only got a preview of the first 3 rows the first time around. So we're really trying to make it, Kurt, to Randy's question earlier, can you update or delete information? Where the answer is like, yes, but no, or no, but yes. We really want you to make sure the data is right before you publish it the first time so that you don't have to go through those questions. So this is sort of like the last check. You've seen like 3 or 4 now checkpoints in the middle where we really want you to take a minute and think about what you're doing before you put it on chain. But all of these records have now been staged into our database, and with a single click, we can start the import. So when I click start import here, I believe we should see this, yeah. So I'm gonna bring up the console so we can see these broadcasts happen in real time. Oh, well, that's a little weird. But these are publishing to chain now, as we're talking. And if I were to, I believe we set it up so that if I were to, let's say, go do some other work on a different tab.
Just wanted to take a moment to say, hey, if you need a 2-minute break or an intermission or something, like, let me know.
Yeah, let's
But-
go right
Perfect.
I'll take a drink and then we'll build something together. So yeah, you can see that while I was going to do other things, although this page doesn't exist, let's get to a page that does exist so it looks a little better. This is continuing to upload in the background. So these records are being added to chain one by one, and then to the application as well. Oop, that's not the right app. All right, so these are now being added to the blockchain. In addition, you see there's only 55 records published so far, in addition to our database. So if for any reason the upload or the publication of these records to chain fails, let's say 57 records in, your internet freaks out. Or, I don't know, maybe you were driving in a car and doing this on your mobile phone and you lose cell service. It's okay. As soon as it stops, when you click start again, it'll restart from the fail point and not reproduce the first 57 records that you created, but start from 58 and continue forward. There are a few things that we're adding at this moment. If you'll notice, we're still in beta. The domain here has a beta moniker. But the same type of thing is true with multiple spreadsheets. If you have a, let's call it an earnings report. Let's say you're a business, you're in the financial division, you want to publish your earnings report to the blockchain so that it's there forever and it's publicly auditable. You're probably going to have a spreadsheet that's called like earnings report, right? And maybe it has a date at the end of it, but probably it's going to have a bunch of different tabs at the bottom, one for each month or quarter or whatever. So the spreadsheet you're going to upload is going to look identical to the last one that you just uploaded. If we find that, you shouldn't need to recreate, the whole setup of what's stored to chain and what's hidden and which fields are selected and not. It should just identify that we already have seen this type of spreadsheet before and look at each of the records to make sure they're not a duplication, and then stage the records that are not a dupe that allows you with this one-click publication to click publish and only publish the records that are new. Because again, you can't delete them from the blockchain once they're created. So if you create duplicates, you will have two on the chain forever. Let's just go back and see that this is still ticking up. So I guess, Kurt, this is probably a good time for a quick intermission, maybe somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. And in that time, I'll talk to the room here and see if we can come up with an idea that we should build.
Go room.
I'm muted, so that's funny. All right, hey everybody. Super cool. First of all, anybody? Oh, just so anybody knows, if you're in the background, you're also on the stream. So, really cool stuff. I think the really interesting thing here is just how simple but powerful it is, discoverable. I'm one of those people that's of the level where I may use Squarespace or Wix, but like really don't want to do a WordPress site if I can help it. So I think for a lot of people, they might also take that opportunity to look at this and say, hey, you know what? I'm not a blockchain developer. I'm not a software developer, but I understand conceptually like what an app should look like, or what kind of data that I want to put on the blockchain, or what I want my business potentially to look like. And if that's the case, well, then you have an opportunity here. I should shill the URL actually while I'm talking here, because we've got where are my banners at? So magicdapp.io. Where are my example banners? Come on, there we go. Magicdapp.io. So Zack, for anybody watching, I'm gonna turn this into a little bit of a South Florida Citadel ad here because I can. So if you have an app, or if you have a business, if you have something that you want to share with the world and you want to show it in the beautiful tropical Delray Beach, South Florida, please reach out. Let me know that you have something that you want to show to the world and we can book it out. So our calendar is booked out for the next probably 60 days right now. But if you wanted to squeeze something really important in, we could probably make arrangements for you. But if you want to plan for summer or after, maybe plan for Christmas, let me know. Please reach out. Let's figure out what to do with you, because there's a big opportunity here. We've got, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15. We got maybe 14 people in here right now. But if we were to really plan it well, we can get a good crowd out here. We also have all kinds of people. So for consumer apps, we can advertise locally and get people out here to try your whole application. And if you want to do something more intense, if you want something more developer related, we can talk to Bitcoin Association. We talk potentially about sponsorships and get stuff rolling like that. So there's a big opportunity to come show your application, show your work, and have us all work together. And if you've got a business opportunity here that might make sense to put on Magic Dapp, by all means, reach out directly to Zach or Justin, who are both here in the room, or you can send us a DM. You can send me a DM. I can connect you to them if you're not sure how best to get in touch with them. Zach, how much time do you need here? We good? You need a minute? Yeah, for the break. 2 more minutes. All right. This will be the 2-minute warning, everybody. So for anybody else watching, if you want to put in your questions, comments, anything else, if you haven't subscribed, or hit the alert bell, we would really appreciate it so that we can get YouTube monetization and some of that stuff hooked up over here with the official Citadel channel.
Hello to everyone in Africa who's watching.
Oh, and a special hello to everyone in Africa who is tuned in live and watching now.
Johannesburg.
From Joburg, man. We got the Joburg crowd crew and Ghana. That's awesome. No, very, very cool. So Justin Pauly and Zack Weiner say hello. And we're rocking and rolling here. So again, reminder, if you want to debut an app, or if you want to show an app, you want to do a workshop, you want to host a hackathon, please reach out to me. We would love to have you, host you, and have a really good time. We have a good local crew. We probably have a dozen people locally that are super into blockchain stuff and work out of this office on a regular basis. But if we go like 50 miles out, it's pretty easy to get hundreds of people jazzed up about a thing. So don't be afraid to reach out. Let's make a plan. Let's book you to come out here, debut your stuff. We got pretty decent sound, audio, video, and tooling here for you to give a pretty good presentation. And we'll stream it live. So free advertisement and really good stuff. And yeah, so I think we can cut back to Zach here in a couple of moments. If I get the thumbs up here, all right, we're good to go. Zach, handing off the baton back to you, sir. Thank you.
Sure. So if we go back to the share screen, you'll see that this is still running, but I'm going to stop the import for a second to go drive home a point that Justin reminded me that I didn't really make that well, which is this incident report now has a fully formed schema that we didn't touch or drag and drop anything to get the details into the form builder. So when I said that the application takes a look at the column headers and then creates a schema from that, you're actually seeing the end result of that right now. So we uploaded a spreadsheet. I didn't do any drag and drop in this. And we got the field types and field titles specifically out of the spreadsheet. So we went from spreadsheet to distributed application with almost nothing in the middle. There was no user configuration. There was no setup needed. It was all just spread up, spreadsheet to distributed app. Now let's see how much of this is still going. Oh, right, I paused this. Okay. Let's build something. I'm going to create a new application. We're going to call this Citadel demo. So that's a new application. In the Citadel demo, we're not going to restrict registration. Don't know if this, let's just toggle all of these on and see what saves. And we're going to go ahead and add a new entity. So, Kurt, we have a Citadel here. We saved some information. Maybe announcements would be something that would be broadcast out of the Citadel to the blockchain. Is that a reasonable schema?
I think we could make that happen, yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with announcements. And this won't get assigned to anybody. We'll give it a title, a text field that we're going to call title. not going to use predefined values. We are going to include this in the blockchain. Okay, so we got a title. Let's say I have a, oops, let's say announcement date. Things get a little wonky when I'm sharing the screen at the same time, so please bear with me. Okay, so let's say date. I'm going to call this announcement date. Actually, let's say, yeah, why not? Announcement date. Save that. No, we'll go through and toggle those on in a second. What I really wanted to do is add the rich text editor here and maybe get this to the bottom if it'll let me. Yeah, it's being weird about reload. Okay. And we're going to say announcement. You can use Markdown to make announcements. Let's save that change as well. Okay, so we have these three field types. Each one has their own settings. We changed the label on them, but we are going to just do a couple of more additions. I'm going to choose to include all of these in the blockchain. So that was okay. We're going to use this one in the blockchain. And we'll also put this one in the blockchain. And then for one of these, we're actually going to choose title to also be used as the record title. So instead of the title reading announcement, and then you having to expand it to see the announcement, what you're actually going to see is the announcement's title with a caret, and you'll be able to expand that. So we're going to include all of the information in the blockchain and set one of these as the title. So we haven't created a record of this type yet, so we have no data in the data field. We haven't set any permissions, but admin can always write records, so we're fine there. And in this case, a user can read them. User does not have permission to write announcements. And this was the thing that I wanted to show before, but I kind of skipped over, which is if you don't like the way that we present your data, you are free to create your own view of how the data is presented. So using mustache notation, which is really common for people who have ever used Python or JavaScript to build applications in content management systems, WordPress, what's the other one? I'm not going to shill other applications. WordPress is open source, so I feel okay saying that. But I mean, you could literally type some HTML in here. And use this mustache notation to say, to put the field names in. And this is how your record would show. So we provide you some default options. They're really not that pretty. It's meant just to show data. But if we do have a reason to, or you'd like to, or like to have us make your data look pretty, it's really easy for us to configure the ability to do that. I'm not going to save this. We're going to jump out of the custom template for a second. And we're just going to create a new record. So we're in the announcements schema context. So it already populated to me that we know we want to create an announcement. This was a date type. So it brought up a nice little date selector field. Let's make an announcement for tomorrow. Are we doing anything in here tomorrow? Ask Zach anything. So we'll do an AMA with Zach. Oh yeah, okay, that's better. I promise, you guys would like the barbecue a lot better than an AMA with me.
But dude, barbecue Fridays are fire over here.
If you're in South Florida, or you're coming to visit the Citadel, make sure you're here on Friday. The barbecue is worth it.
It's not the STI email.
It's not the what?
Yes, or the CTI email.
Oh, I spelled Citadel wrong. That's what you're trying to. So you were talking about the barbecue. So in addition to plain text types, You can see, I'll actually just add some spaces so we can see it a little better. We get a rich text editor field here. So again, this is pretty WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, but this is pretty much ultimately configurable. Barbecue lunch, so we can make this the title. Let's maybe in here we'll say member. We'll make that even smaller. Oops. Barbecue lunch. We'll say members benefits. They don't actually buy your lunch here, but we're going to pretend that they do, just to demonstrate that you could have a different type of a header. We'll say lunch starts at 12 p.m. and then maybe something like bring, and we need, oops, disposable utensils. I swear I can spell. I'm good at this. I'm good at words. We need disposable utensils, napkins, plates, fire, a barbecue pit, bring all the things that we need. But basically what I'm really just trying to drive home here is that this rich text editor field type has a lot of value. Oops. And can do things that plain text might not necessarily be able to do. And then when we save this and it gets put on the blockchain, let me get a transaction ID here from that. Number one, we can check it out here. So we have the record of this. Let's not worry about invalid right now. Number one, a block needs to be mined in order for it to become valid. But there is also this rich text editor thing that I can go into details about the validity of and how we consider something valid. But in this case, what you're seeing here is essentially we've pulled this record back and said, hey, this was the formatting that was used, this was the text that was used, and this is all validatable. It's not the word that I wanted to use. But in addition to being forever, can be validated, can also be audited, right? So people outside of the organization might be able to then see what announcements were sent to outsiders, insiders, investor relations, the barbecue truck, however that happens to work out. Now, as the application was created, we actually got a URL here that defines the application itself. So we're in the admin view. You can see that we're in the admin view. I can't make the URL bar of my computer zoom in, but if I could, you would see that right here it says admin and then app. And then when we go and take a look at the URL itself, there's no admin in there. So the admin part of the path has been removed and it's just app with an ID. So when we go to this app with an ID, and I'm going to do this in a private browser so that we're not logged in any way. You see it redirected me to login. You can see that the Citadel demo was the name of the app that we had assigned to this application. So somebody is now coming to the Citadel demo app to log in as a user. Now, we just created that, so nobody's going to have an account. And in this beta, we have turned off email verification. So I'm just going to say office@gmail.com. Oops, it's a password. When I register for this app, be able to log in. I think I call this office@gmail.com. That's strange. Did I call it Office 1? All right. That's possible. Okay, so it's a user at gmail.com. I think it might be because I'm in a private browser, honestly. We made some updates to how stuff has changed, so the privacy browser is probably the issue. I'm going to give this one a try, though. User at gmail.com, and if not, I'll just bring up a different browser. Yeah, all right, so let's try this one. Yeah, you know, live stuff. There we go. Yeah, it was something with the privacy. Okay, so Office is a user, and if they go to records, they should be able to. Should be. Oh, right. So this was not. We did not make a public feed on this. So they don't. This user doesn't have any records assigned to them, and the announcement was not made with the public feed, which I'm guessing I could go back here and see. Yeah, grant public viewing is not saved. So this actually does notify us now that sometimes it takes about an hour to propagate the settings across all of the apps. So I'm just going to go back to Alpha Dapp real quick. And we'll do this from here. So I'll jump in as a user on this app. And we'll show, I also have an announcements field here that we created on a different application. So just to example the demonstration, when the announcements show up, we have the title, right? So the announcements title was a great way to start. We have the author's ID. This is actually duplicating the title, which is not great, but it is there. And then we have this rich text editor view. So even as a user, we can still see that same well-formatted view of the data. Whether or not this data was saved to the chain, it was still signed and included in the signature that was published to the chain. See what other stuff we got. Oh yeah, okay, so with the rich text editor, there are a couple of other types of ways that you could present data. One of them is if you have code, you can make it show up in this nice little gray box like it does on like Stack Overflow or code sharing websites, and then something that's maybe more like Medium with this idea of creating a quotation here that's got a format around the quote. And then you see, these lists. Now, we're looking at this application from a different view than you've seen previously. For the first hour of doing Magic Dapp Alpha Dapp, we looked at the admin side of things. So I'm going to close this up just a little bit to demonstrate the difference. Get out of the privacy browser. But when you're on the user side of things, the view is a little bit different because you're viewing it in a smaller screen. So in a wide screen, we have this nice little, left side menu that's expected, but we're kind of generally thinking that most of the users, the people who are actually going to be in the app reading records or trying to find one, or let's say sharing their own records with some validator. I want to prove that I went to school or that I have the certification to work on this air conditioning, right? I'm probably going to be doing that from my phone on the run. So the thinner view actually looks just like an app, which means you don't need to go to the App Store and download something. You can use this from your phone just like it was an app from a web URL, in the same way that you use any other website, which means it will never get removed from the iOS or Android store. You'll never have to worry about, did we get publication rights? So for the people in the room, some of the viewers on the live stream are from countries in Africa that don't necessarily have the same access to the app stores that we do. They may actually have some more restrictions on what's available in the App Store than in places like the United States or the UK. If If you think about extending that even further to places like China, they probably have way more restrictions about what can make it into an app store, whether that's, you know, Samsung's, Apple's, or their own. I think Tennyson has an app store. In this way, you don't have to be able to download an app to be able to write records to the blockchain. All you need is access to the web. And frankly, if you don't have access to the web, you're probably going to have trouble accessing the blockchain anyway. So the two things kind of go hand in hand in that respect. From the user's side of things, the user has a couple of abilities here. So number one is they could check the feed. So this is the public feed of things that were published that everybody should be able to see. And in this case, you know, this user logged in for a school's application. So when they click courses, they can actually see everybody's courses. This was all public. We don't save names in the course record, so it's kind of meaningless whether or not you can see my course record. We can only prove it's mine if I'm willing to share some of that private information that wasn't stored directly on chain. We also have our own record set area. So these are records that are just mine. In this case, this user has 2 records that are assigned to them. So just to drive that point home for a second even further, right now you see on the screen there are 2 records. These are both assigned to student 1KFS. If I click the feed option instead of my records, they might be assigned to somebody else, right? So these are the public records. And when I click on records, these are the ones that have been assigned to me. Now, the first button here is announcements. There were no announcements that were assigned to somebody. They were all public records. In the same vein, there was no student feedback that was assigned to me. I might be able to create some student feedback, but it wasn't assigned to me as a student. But as courses go, I do have courses that were assigned to me. So these are ones where I am the owner. Every user's application, I'll make this a little smaller so that you can actually tell if you look real close that this is a QR code in this button, but every user gets a QR code that we had demonstrated before that allows them, as you had seen on my phone, to be able to share the records that they would like with a verifier. So in this case, if we were to, let's say, map, let's say we have your student ID, your first name and your last name stored in your profile, but not stored on the blockchain, this is where some of those validation quirks come in. So we may know, as Magic Dapp or Alpha Dapp, that the person who published your record, your course record, was an authorized admin for that app, right? So it was, I don't know, Professor Justin wrote the record. So we might consider that a valid record on its face. Is this a valid record for Justin's university? Justin is an admin, Justin wrote the record, that's considered valid. But then there's that other signature that I told you about, our data signature, not the blockchain one, that says, okay, for the data that we have on chain, you know, the course ID, the course name, the professor, the date of completion, that was all cool. And we believe this record was written by somebody that we know established to be the admin of this app. And by established, we used a Bitcoin Identity Protocol broadcast transaction. So it's marked up before we even get to this point. We can dive a little deeper in that if necessary. But we know Justin is an admin for this app. You know, Justin has the ability to write records, and we know this record was signed by Justin. So on its face, all of those things, because it was properly signed, should say that this is a valid record. But because the name and birth date of the student didn't go into the record, we need another way to validate some of this, right? Is that data signature the same? Or did I hand the verifier a record that was written by Justin, maybe for Luke, right? So if I take Luke's record or QR code and present it, you know, how do we know that that wasn't my record? And the way is by trying to recreate the data signature with some of the information that was hidden from chain. I would have to add my name, and when I typed in Zack Weiner, the signature would not come out the same as the signature that was written for Luke. Right, so there are a couple of layers of validation that we have going on here. There's actually a third layer that I'm not going to get into on this demo, but if you have interest in that, please direct message me or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and we could talk about that a little bit further. Let's see, what else do we got here? I mean, I guess that's really it. I showed you writing a record in seconds if we were to configure the app for you, like Alpha Dapp. we created an application that allows you to publish or create publications of announcements in about 10 seconds. We created an application that imported data to create the schema, so you didn't even have to configure anything on your own to build the DApp. And all those dApps are now available on the web if you're able to sign up. Now, I think we've restricted sign up. So like, please, if you're copying, if you're typing what you're seeing on the screen and trying to get into these URLs, they may or may not work. We're probably going to disable these sample apps as soon as this demonstration is over. But if you would like beta access to Magic Dapp, I'd encourage you to go to magicdapp.io and you'll get redirected. You could go directly there if you want to beta.magicdapp.io. And there's a little text box in there where you could give us your email address, and we will slowly be rolling out beta access over the next, I don't know, few weeks. Let's not put a time limit on it, to get feedback from users to make sure that this is as easy to use as we believe, as infinitely configurable as we believe, but we're also going to be rolling out some interesting new options. So right now, we've shown you an example of a record that you created yourself from your own data schema. We will also have pre-configured options. So in the example where we're talking like we're using Alpha Dapp and our company is configuring something for, let's say, a greater need. If we're constructing something specifically for your company, that's one thing. That's going to live in your company's data sets, your schema sets. But if we're considering something more generic, like let's say courses that could be used by multiple schools or school systems, you should be able to choose that generic type of course from your schema list when you're getting started with an application. Right, so just to drive this point home, this isn't set up as well as I would like, but when we choose to create a new, actually let me jump back to Alpha Dapp or Magic Dapp real quick. When we click create a new entity, if you don't type in your new schema name, you have an option on the right here to use a template. And so when you click template, we have course set up as the first template because that's where we're targeting as our business use. But there will be a couple of other templates that show up in here. Invoice should be one of these. In addition to course, we will have degree, right? So you completed 25 courses, and those now coalesce into one graduation stamp or certificate. We may go even further to include social features so that you can build your own social networks and choose a type of social post from here. And in that way, you'll be able to deploy a invoicing and billing system or a social network in 5 clicks, all using the same base tools called Magic Dapp or Alpha Dapp. We believe that not only is this infinitely configurable for businesses, but for things that you do in your hobby time, and also for things like government, right? So from the most minor scale to the most massive scale, we can help to put that data on chain in a way that's identifiable, verifiable, and authenticatable in a way that can be audited nearly instantly. Whatever the use case is, Magic Dapp can probably get you most of the way there. And if it can't, we can configure Alpha Dapp for you so that it is exactly what your business requirement needs. And with that, I think we'll open the floor for some more questions. Luke.
First of all, really cool. Second, I kind of 2 things that are going on. One is you were mentioning, okay, super flexible, you can do a lot of things with this. But I just wanted to say, could you speak for a second about what happens if you can't? You have the schema on chain, you should be able to do a lot because you have the records there. You build a separate application that's custom.
Sure.
That can do whatever you want.
Okay, so let me put that question on hold for a second and say that after we get through like a basic round of questions, I'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into map and the map protocol because we have some time here to explain like the foundations of how we're storing this data. And I think that to Luke's question and point, Luke created Magic Attribute Protocol. It used to have a different name, but he's built some tools around being able to use the protocol so that we can inspect transactions, see that they were broadcasted correctly, find schemas, or take a look at other data sets that might be using similar schemas. So we can dive into that and how to look at what's being saved on the chain, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, well, I have a second question that's more high level than that you might want to get there. So can you go into, so from the perspective of a person watching that, as in like the healthcare industry in particular, you did a lot with that before with VXPass and stuff like that. Can you speak to how someone needing a solution for medical records, like a lot of medical records, how this would apply to somebody who's just like exploring how blockchain can help them and what this can do and how they would do that?
Sure. So I think at its foundation, a medical record is just like any other type of record, except you want to keep a lot more of the information private, right? If you're talking about a Facebook post, like it's public by default. You may have restrictions around like which of your friends can see it, but it's public by default. But with medical records, almost everything in there should be private by default. It's the exact opposite. So there's two main issues. Number one is how much of this data are we storing on chain, right? And that should never include your name, your birthday, your social security number, or anything that may be pseudo medical data that can be tied back to you. So that could be like an appointment time, right? If somebody knows your appointment time and your doctor, they might be able to get into your doctor's system to find out your blockchain information, vice versa. Which is specifically, so when we went and I showed you, that when we're in one of these applications and we're looking at the schema, and we're looking at a schema and we're talking about how to build the elements, one of the options is to include it in the blockchain. By default, we actually don't include these fields in the blockchain. By default, if you don't actively click this, it's only going to be in our database. So if you come back to us and say, hey, we stored some highly sensitive data and we'd like to delete it, we can just remove it from our database, no problem. Cool, you called us, we took care of it. Once you include it in the blockchain, you can't do that, right? So with medical records, there's probably the majority of the record itself is not going to be included in the chain, right? There's probably some public information or some information in your medical record that could be public and probably is valuable to be public. So for instance, if we're talking about cardiac episodes, right? Let's say you're a cardiac patient, you're being monitored for your heart rate for whatever reason. You have a pacemaker in there. Your name, your birthday, your social, your blood type, all of these things should not be stored on chain. But the information about how your heart was beating might be valuable to be stored in plain text on chain. If you can never tie that record back to an individual patient, then there's a lot of information that becomes valuable in aggregate so that we can learn a lot more about health and healthcare. So when we think about using something like Magic Dapp, and truthfully, if you are in the healthcare space, you're probably going to be our client as an Alpha Dapp client so that we can configure this for you, walk you through the security settings, make sure that all of the configuration is protecting people's private data before deployment, kind of a thing. But if we are creating apps for Magic and Alpha in the medical space, most of the data is going to be toggled off for include in the blockchain. One of the next features that we'll be adding is encrypt this field. So for right now, the way that we built VX Tech, it removed every bit of personal information, only created a signature out of that, but never, ever, ever had anything close to personal in it, and had all the documentation information about the procedure in plain text English. So that for people who wanted to audit the system, see how many were given, of what brand, where adverse effects may come from, are there clusters, were those things from specific lot numbers, right? All of those things should have been plain text so that analysis can be done on the records, but there's no way to go backwards from any of the data stored on chain in that record to a person or personally identifiable information. Now that's one of the great things that I'd like to just drive home real quick for anybody in the audience or watching at home. In the difference between what we call like a data hash and what we call encryption. So encryption means that if you have a decryption key, you should be able to reverse the encryption. So if I put my name into an encryption algorithm, Zack Weiner, and the key is 1234, I give Justin the encrypted information, I give him the key 1234. With those two things together, he should be able to transform the encrypted text back into Zack Weiner with the key 1234. With a signature, you can never do that. You can never have a key that says, okay, here's a data blob. With this key, we're going to transform the encrypted data blob into something valuable. The only way that you can get this same signature is to run a single function that only outputs one type of data and takes any amount of data that you want to put as an input. So with a signature, we're basically dumping all the information that should never be able to be walked back or reversed into an algorithm that takes it into a funnel, mashes it up kind of like a sausage, and spits out one sausage with a very unique characteristic. And if you always use the same input, Zack Weiner, my birth date, the sausage will come out in the exact same shape with the exact same markings every single time. But if you were to put the name Luke in there, the shape may change, or the color may change, or the texture may change, so they're no longer exactly the same. And so we can create validatable or provable data in a way that allows us to prove highly sensitive information without ever putting that information at risk in a way that somebody can find it later on the chain and like brute force it with decryption keys and try to spit out what you put in. If you don't know what went in, you can never get the same thing back out. And if you only start with the output, you can never reverse it to create the input. I know that was more about signatures and data stores than it was about healthcare records, but did that answer the question? Yeah? Okay. Now we were getting back to the second part that was map specific.
Yeah, just showing that it's a unified protocol. It's something like you can build something custom outside of the systems that interact with the same data.
Right. So once the data is published, and I'd encourage anybody in the room, or if you're a developer watching at home, check out the tools that are provided. What's the repo name now? Is it under your personal? What is?
Oh, which one?
For the BMAP stuff?
I guess the best place is map.sv. It has links to it. It's a little, it hasn't been updated in a while, but it's got links to the repo and it talks about the protocol.
Okay, and you can see this on my screen now? Yeah, okay. So underlying all of Magic Dapp and Alpha Dapp is Magic Attribute Protocol. The protocol itself is incredibly simple. It allows us essentially to store any arbitrary data on chain in a way that tags the field names so that you can bring it back as like JSON objects and transmit this information that's been stored on chain across web APIs or really any sort of API now, because almost everything interacts with JSON. And it defines for us how we create the output. So when we were looking at what's on chain back here, and we were inspecting it, what we were actually inspecting was the output. So you noticed I went to what's on chain, I pasted into transaction ID, it brought up this page, and then I clicked, it started on inputs, but I clicked outputs. And in the outputs, the web page is actually showing us all of the data that was stored in the output, in one output of this transaction. Now we defined what the field name would be, course name, course ID, right? And then we put a value in after it. But Magic Attribute Protocol helped us to define how we structure those field names and how we structure the values that are stored with those field names. And then again later, at the end of it, how we include the signature around the data that was stored. So once this data is published on chain, and we use this standard, right? So if you want to take a look at the standard the Magic Attribute, Magic Dapp uses, you can find it at map.sv. But once you publish some information to the chain using this standard, there's a set of indexers, and these are open source, so we can run them, you can run them, we can configure them, that actually take a look at each of the transactions that have been published to the blockchain, looks at, is this a map transaction? Is this a magic transaction? And if it is, if it follows the same format that the magic transactions are expecting, it puts it in the database so that we can look at them through this nice little web interface. The web interface is showing us literally the same thing as the plain text was back here, but in a more well-divided view. So let's see if we can blow this up a little bit. First, we have some information about the transaction, its hash itself. This is the identifier, how you would call it from chain. The second thing that we see here, which I think is movable if we do that, is AIP signature. And then in this third column here, you see, and as I move the columns, they sort of change in size, that it says map. Right? So all of this is the map data, the magic data that we would be storing. Now, there are other applications that use this same format, right? There are custom applications that build around the same protocol for storing data. So I think this one's probably Twedge. Oh no, this is actually our transaction. How about that? This is coming out of our spreadsheet right now. I can see it's one of those officer involved shooting reports. And so in looking at this, I know it's a little hard to see because these field types are let's see if we can make this a little bigger.
Search for these, well, no.
But you can actually, if you take a look here, you can actually see that the headers in this spreadsheet displayed on screen are the same headers that we have from our spreadsheet. So this was like uploading in the background. It's conforming to a protocol. Because it conforms to the protocol, once it's been published to the blockchain and included in a block, actually I think this might find it in mempool too, but let's for definition's sake, once it's been included in a block, this indexer can find that the transaction conformed to the protocol and show it on the screen right here. So in addition to our display of what we're showing after you've uploaded a spreadsheet, you can actually see them being uploaded in real time from other tools that are built on top of the same blockchain. And this becomes the foundation of the power of Magic Dapp. Once you've put some data on chain, right? Once you've put it in a place that's now acting as your database, let's use database for this word because it's going to be the web. Your division, you as an individual user, you as a company, you as a project, you as an organization can go and build new interfaces that show this information in different ways without ever needing to worry about the security of creating the records or writing permissions around what users have the ability to write or validate or approve records, right? So you can use the Magic Dapp part as your data input, as your protections, your permissions, your accessibility, and then build a whole new user interface that displays, I don't know, maybe charts and graphs, or builds a game off of well, maybe we shouldn't make a game out of officer-involved incident report or officer-involved shootings, but if we had more fun data, like let's say weather, maybe you have a game that is played based on the types of weather, or cars, a racing game that makes a game out of the car details that are published using that, and create an interface that is very different and in almost no way tied to the default interface that Magic Dapp and Alpha Dapp provide you. Do we have any other questions? It's a lot of silence. What about on the YouTubes?
Actually, I think you answered all the YouTube questions just in your,
Oh, nice.
basically just asking, when.
Sorry, I keep not unmuting myself.
So when is now. Find me on Twitter. We'll set you up. Today is the day.
Beautiful.
No soon TMs from me, buddies.
Excellent. Yeah, and then asking hey, when's the beta period, et cetera, et cetera. Then just a lot of praise, man. You're getting a lot of good marks out of the YouTube comments.
We love Magic.
We love the magic. And Alpha Dapp is out the worst anybody work our sort of enterprise level customers already.
Cool.
That is operational.
Alpha Dapp up now, ready to rock and roll.
And Justin is who you should reach out to if you are watching this on the video for Alpha Dapp, unless you happen to be in Ghana, in which case reach out to Prince. Or South Africa, in which case reach out to Dr. Catherine. But if you don't know who those people are yet, I'm saying that because we do have some people watching together in South Africa and Ghana. If you don't know who those people are yet, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, at Developing Zack on Twitter. On LinkedIn, I think I'm Zack Weiner. Those are probably the two easiest way to find me. I'm also sayhello@vxpass.com, although that email address is probably going to go away relatively soon. We'll have domains at Magic Dapp and Alpha Dapp. But if you are an individual that wants to get set up with the beta, you can reach out to me directly. If you're a corporation or organization that wants us to build these for you, meaning, if you are a organization or corporation that would like for us to build this with you or for you, that is Alpha Dapp, and please reach out to Justin or the named people in those locations. If you don't know how to reach Justin, Prince, or Dr. Catherine, please reach out to me at Developing Zack. Or say hello at VX Past Hours. But that one's going to go away. So if you watch this more than 30 days after March 16th, 2023, probably just find me on Twitter.
Beautiful. I think we can wrap there. So thanks to everybody for watching. Zack, this was awesome. I'm super excited about all of this. So really, really glad to have you here working out of the South Florida Bitcoin Citadel. If you want to schedule something similar in the future, if you're somebody watching, here, Zack, I'll remove you from the stream so you can, there you go. So to anybody watching live, if you would like to debut your app or your business or do a workshop or a hackathon or whatever, please reach out. We can do similar streams. We'll produce them for you live, and we can help you launch your business, give your business to Bitcoin, or sell your business to Bitcoin. I don't know. So I'm Kurt Wicker Jr. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and send this across social media. Let them know that, holy crap, I can build an app with magicdapp.io, and you're a Bitcoin business very, very quickly. That is the cornerstone of hyper-Bitcoinization. So thanks to everybody. Really, really appreciate you. We'll be back next month with I believe we're doing a hackathon. All kinds of details to be announced soon. You can also check us out on Meetup, where we have a calendar that rocks and rolls. So we have Bitcoin Bingo tonight by Punicorn Social Club. We've got a Bitcade next week, and then we got a Meetup in another couple of weeks. So please follow Meetup for the calendar. I'm going to stop talking. I'm Kurt Wicker Jr. Oh, there's the clap. All right. All right. Good crowd today. See you, everybody.